Hi, this is Margaret Byrd and welcome to Color Quest and welcome to a beautiful greenhouse on Viva Farms. I am here visiting my friends Amy and Max, who are the incredible farming duo of the Color Farm. You've seen several videos here where I was fortunate enough to spend time where they're growing beautiful dye plants. And now I'm back here in the springtime because they are in the process of planting for this year. So come into their greenhouse with me today as we learn a little bit about what they're doing within their own seed prep and compare a little bit of what I did a few weeks ago at home on the video that I showed here, where I started a series of dye plants as well in my kitchen. And we'll see some new ways and how they are going to be producing their plants for this year. And my glasses may be dark, but that does not have to do with the sun. I don't know if you can hear it on the video, but it is absolutely pouring rain here. But I am protected in this incredible greenhouse, and it's a wonderful way to understand a little bit more about how the farming community here in the Pacific Northwest starts to grow their plants in preparation for the beautiful summer sun that we do in fact have here in the Pacific Northwest. And if you missed last week's video, I was in a slightly different climate. It was shot all in Baja, California, Mexico, and it is 100% about the incredible color that bougainvillea can bring you in the form of ink. So if you want a sunny moment here on Color Quest, go back to last week's video and check that out. But in the meantime, let's go see what Amy and Max are up to in their cozy greenhouse in this very rainy day in the springtime in the Pacific Northwest. Here we are, about to meet Max and Amy of the Color Farm. They are doing their springtime seed activity, and they've invited me to come talk to them about it. Hi there.
Hi.
So nice to see both of you. Thank you for the invitation to come and see what the Color Farm does in this spring season.
Yeah, of course.
You're welcome anytime.
I so enjoyed coming here last late summer, fall, and learned so much from you. And I am beyond excited about things that we're planning to do together later this year. So thank you. Yeah. So as I just planted some seeds of my own at home, and I know that you're in the midst now of doing the same here, so I wanted to learn about what you're doing, and maybe you could talk about the process, but then also, you know, give maybe some tips and tricks or things that people at home who are interested in growing, I guess any plant, but particularly dye plants, might want to know about.
Well, right now we're probably a little bit early in the season, but we're starting some of our flowers for the farm this year. Right now we're going to be planting some Cosmo seeds. It's still mid-March, which it might be a little bit cold outside, But we're gonna see which ones germinate, and if they do, we'll have some ready to go in the field early. But we're also planting some transplants that we'll have available for sale later in the spring.
Ooh, for sale?
Yeah.
Now that is interesting. I know I'm going to be super interested with that.
Yeah. We had a small plant sale last year, and that went really well, and people really liked it. So.
And those were like starter plants that had already been grown up into a certain
That's right.
size.
So we'll probably put them into like individual 4-inch pots, and then that's kind of what you get.
Okay. Well, I may have some of those. I might have to jump in on some of your sale to sell off some of my plants.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Okay, so now I'm going to sound like somebody who knows what they're talking about, but I don't. So when I did it at home, I took like a tutorial from Floret Flower. They had us put into the tray wet soil. So what is your thoughts about that, or when will you be wetting the soil? Or
So I'm actually just about to do that.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I did it in my kitchen, so it's a little different. You have this beautiful setup out here where you actually have dirt underneath. So
Yeah, I'm doing it after we put it in here so that we could kind of level out the dirt and get the air pockets. Well, we don't want to get all the air pockets out, but any big ones. So when we water it in, then it'll get all moist, it'll all soak in the water, and then it'll slowly drain out. And then I'm going to make some little furrows, some long little ditches, and plant the seeds into those, and then spread a thin layer of soil over top of that, and then water them in again.
So what I'm just realizing too is that this is actually the tray itself,
Yep.
but not the little pods.
cells, yeah.
Yeah. So will you be planting into this, or is this just the prep that you're doing for the soil?
We'll be planting into this.
Oh, okay.
So-
Talk to me about why you might choose to actually plant into the tray itself as opposed to a cell.
Yeah, so we sometimes will use this type of a tray that has all the cells, and sometimes we'll just use the flat ones. And a nice thing about using just the flat trays is that we can plant a lot of plants into them. It's a little bit quicker and easier to plant because you can kind of spread it in these long furrows that you'll see. On the other hand, something that's really nice about planting into the individual cells, you get this like plug shape. So the cells make it really quick and easy to transplant. The trays make it really quick and easy to seed. And then
Okay.
it's just a little bit more work on the back end when we're ready to transplant to take these and you kind of have to tease the roots apart from each other
Okay.
a little bit to try to keep everything safe. But then ultimately you can just get more starts out of the tray.
Okay, so it's efficient.
It's worked out with us, and I've just been happier when we use the trays.
Okay, good to know.
And also, another benefit of it is growing them in the individual cells, they tend to dry out a little bit quicker.
Oh yeah, I've
Because they
noticed
only
that at
have a little
home.
bit of soil in each one, so this kind of helps them stay a little bit moist for longer.
Yeah, I may need to get some tips on that because I feel like I'm fighting the dry cell versus the oversaturated cell.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of just letting it, if you're not making it, you're not making it, oh well.
Yeah.
But
There's a little bit of that happening too.
but at the same time I'm like, no, guys on the side, you're not doing very well.
And I'll just totally saturate them. They have holes in the bottom of the tray, so they'll
Okay.
drain out. There's some furrows in this one. Let's do 5. So start in the middle, then just do 2 on either side. And you're not going to go too deep. Just maybe a 1/4 inch. Kind of wiggle it as you go through.
So this is how we make up for not having cells, is we make furrows in the dirt.
All this language,
Yeah.
furrow. I always feel like I just don't have it, which isn't surprising,
I didn't have it at first either.
but it's good to learn it.
This is Sulphur Cosmos, and the reason we have this nice handwritten seed packet is because these are our seeds that we saved from the farm from last year, and so now we have like our own seeds ready to plant.
And I was here when you were doing some of that,
Yeah,
and
you
I have
helped with
some
of these, I
some
think.
great film of you in that process when they were so beautiful and they were blooming and it was just gorgeous. So
Let's take a look.
yeah, let's look at that because I did not plant these at home. That was not part of my Oh, yay, look at that.
So we've talked about how seeds look so different from each other, and this is very different from some of the other seeds that we've been looking at.
So here's what I say. They look like pine needles.
They do.
You know, they're absolutely beautiful. We had one seed, and I don't remember which one it was, that had somewhat of a similar look to it.
Is it a marigold?
I think it might have been marigold. They reminded me of like giant dandelion seeds.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's marigold. And by the way, my marigold are doing unbelievable.
That's great.
That's fantastic.
I love growing there.
I think they've actually done the best out of all the ones so far.
So you've noticed that the seeds look similar from a cosmos to a marigold. You will also notice over time that the babies look similar. Kind of the leaves have
The
a
leaves
similar
and
shape.
things. Okay.
And am I mistaken? They're in the same family, aren't they?
Yeah, a lot of
So,
our flowers are actually
Cosmos
in the same family.
and
Marigold.
marigold are in the same family, and a lot of yours are, a lot of your plants
Yeah.
just in
A lot
general.
of them are in the Asteraceae family.
Okay.
What I like to do with seeding leaves is like kind of specific, but since they're so big, it makes them easier to plant in an organized way. The root will start to come out of the point on the fatter end.
Okay.
So what I do is I kind of hold them by the thin end, and then I'll place them kind of like end to end. So
Oh.
I have just a little bit of spacing, and I can even just like poke that bottom tip into
Slightly.
the soil.
Okay.
So that's gonna help them just like grow in one direction. So ideally the roots don't get quite as tangled, and it really helps once they all sprout and you're ready to transplant them. I can like break out this whole section of this tray,
Oh, okay.
have like a strip of plants,
oh,
and I
wow.
can pull one off at a time and
Oh,
place
yeah.
them.
Maybe we should just take a quick step back and say, why would we first plant into a tray in a greenhouse and then later transplant it?
Well, one reason is if that specific plant doesn't like its roots to be jostled with or messed with once it starts establishing in the soil. Another reason is weed pressure. So especially on the farm, we have a ton of weed pressure. There's all kinds of seeds in the soil that want to pop up and start growing, and weeds are really competitive. I had a little bit of an issue last year trying to direct seed, and I just totally lost a bunch of them, and so I tend to lean toward just planting in trays and transplanting. It might be a little bit early to plant these because flowers especially tend to like warmer temperatures. Right now, we're gonna plant these trays and see how the germination is. If they all struggle, we might work on putting them on some heat or putting them in a germination chamber.
It's basically versus a heat mat, it's just like a little tiny heat room.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So
this
like my
one-
kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I can call it a germination. A
Yeah.
germination station? No, what do you call it? A germination chamber.
Gotta go make
It'll be
breakfast
like a
in the
very
germination
large
chamber.
germination chamber.
For now, we're just gonna see how they do, and if they germinate and start growing, then we'll be good to go. And I don't think it'll be too much longer before the weather starts to break and it gets warm enough.
So let's talk about plant spacing a little bit.
Ideally, like if you had this square footage, you would maybe have one seed here and one seed here. You would just have like two plants.
Well, that's the thing, is that if you look at like a seed packet, it will tell you that like when you're ready to plant it, that you need to put them like a foot apart, and that's maybe hard to say goodbye to some of your plant babies if you don't have enough space.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that I default, when I have planted in the past, in having them be way too close together.
Yeah. These cosmos, they get huge, especially on our farm.
Do you remember our cosmos?
Oh yeah, it was like
grows
taller
last
than
year?
you, I think.
It's like these huge, big bushes.
Yeah.
And each of them comes from one seed, ultimately. So can you imagine what if somehow in that same row we had like, instead of let's say 50 cosmos plants, if we had like 300 cosmos plants, like that would be just,
Right.
and they wouldn't have been able to succeed anyway because they'd be competing with each other.
Right.
We spaced these cosmos at 16 inches, which was enough space to give each plant enough space to grow, but also close enough that the plants could hold each other up. So now since we've planted these furrows, we're gonna cover the seeds with a layer of soil. And we really only need like 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch of soil over top of them. You just want the soil covering all sides of the seed. And then once we get all of that in, we're gonna water it in again. I wanna be gentle so I don't jostle the seeds too much. Especially with a smaller seed. With the really small seeds, you have to worry about that a lot. The main thing that you want is to saturate the soil. So you just want the soil, because you want the water to be available for the plants, but also a good soil composition has about 50% water in it.
Okay. At all times?
Well, it's hard to measure, so you kind of have to do it by feel. So it's, especially when you're sprouting seeds, you want it to be moist. You want water to be always available, but you don't want to soak it because you don't want to drown it. So that's the art of growing plants. Like you can't just like tell somebody how to do it. Like I'm still learning how to do it. You want water to be able to drain from the whole system. So that's why we have holes in the bottom of these. So when we water it, the actual soil will absorb some water and hold the water that it needs, and the rest will drain out. And then we just kind of monitor it every day or two to make sure that it's still moist, and when it gets a little bit too dry, we add a little bit more water. And that's just as an art, you just see what works and what doesn't work. But when you're starting plants, they need a little bit more water, and a lot of them, once they start to establish, they'll need a little bit less water.
Okay. Good to know.
So what germination rate do we expect for these 2 trays?
For these 2 trays, we want to be above like 70%, I would say. We winnowed these seeds down, which was selecting the good seeds out of all the seeds that we harvested, but depends on how successful that process was. And
so can I ask about that? The winnowing process, was that with the box fan?
Yeah, we used a box fan with all of the seed that we had harvested.
So the reason that we do the winnowing is so that we can get the heaviest seeds. And so the ones that are the bigger and heavier ones are going to be just more likely to succeed. So all of those things we've done, winnowing, planting them the right way, getting them in the soil that we like, which we haven't even talked about yet, all those things are just setting them up for success.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, the most important part. No, labeling. Oh, and you even put the date. Oh, so fancy.
Yeah, that's going to be important for us.
It's going to help to keep track, because we'll come back and we'll just continue planting, and it's good to say like, okay, maybe these ones we planted on the 19th, they never sprouted. The ones we planted after did, so we'll know that this is just a no-go tray.
All right, so now that we have the seeds watered in and ready to go, we're going to cover them with this little dome. And that's going to hold in the moisture, keep a little moisture so that we can maybe go an extra day without watering them. And it's also going to hold the heat in, especially since it's really cold right now. Keeping a little bit of extra heat will help them germinate faster and have a higher rate of germination. So we're going to cover all of the seeds that we start in the next few weeks with these while they germinate.
And then, when do you take the tops off? Because I know when I took the tops off, I have no idea if I did it right, but...
Ideally, we would do it a few days after they start germinating, and that might be the first thing that we start to do for the seedlings to help harden them off, to get ready to move outside.
And they'll live in here, right?
Yeah, they'll live in here for the next few weeks, maybe even like 3 weeks, depending on the weather, if it stays kind of chilly. And then we'll take those off, and then we'll have to slowly start moving them outside to harden them off.
I was going to ask, are you going to do like they're outside for a little bit and then they come back in? And
yeah, we'll do outside for an hour or two the first day we take them out, and then increase that by an hour or two for ideally about a week before they're ready to transplant. So, but especially since this is our first round of seeding, they might stay in the greenhouse a little bit longer than ones that we would plant, say, in May in the greenhouse.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And these are, you said marigold?
Yeah, we've got marigold, and we got some indigo, some more cosmos. We've actually got some of them are in trays like this one and this one. Those will be for transplanting. And all of these we planted in the cells. These will be available for selling as starts.
Okay, so I noticed you have this very interesting instrument, and I just asked you what it is, and you told me.
It's called a Hori. It's a multifunctional tool for gardening and farming. It's basically a knife, a saw, a trowel, a measuring device. It's all kinds of things. It's a Japanese tool. Hori means dig.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. And when I started farming, I got one of these. It felt really special to get it. I'm a farmer and a carpenter, so I really love tools.
Okay.
And so that's why I got this, and it's functional it's really useful for seeding, it's really useful for transplanting, all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it just looks really pretty too. So this is a mobile hose.
Yeah,
Ingenious. That's wonderful. So then you can move the hose without getting caught in the ground or whatever, and then take it to your station.
Pretty cool, huh?
And everybody has a station. And I know this because I saw these signs, and I happened to notice this sign, which I think is awesome. The color form. All right, so I am peeking into the seed packet. You have just planted 2 trays. How many more seeds are left in that packet, do you think? Guesstimate.
Maybe 50.
Okay, so last year, approximately how many Cosmo plants did you plant?
Well, we started a lot because we didn't know exactly how many we were going to plant, and we ended up planting a lot. We did a whole bed, but we also sold some as plant starts, and then we ended up continuing to seed throughout the year just to see like how late would make sense to seed. And so a lot of them didn't end up going into the ground, but it was in the multiple hundreds, I would say. The Cosmos were really conducive for seed harvesting because they started producing seed while we were still harvesting the flower, which made it great because we could go out, harvest some flowers, and then when you exhaust an area, just harvest a bunch of seeds as well.
So let me ask the obvious question. Why did you harvest the flowers? What did you do with those flowers?
Well, we have our natural dye, CSA, our community supported agriculture, which is usually for produce farms, and people can buy a share for a season and get a weekly produce box. But for us, we do it.
Which I did.
Yeah, we do it as more of a product focus, and so we use our flowers to create natural dye kits. And so each month we make a natural dye kit with our dried flowers that we harvest, and then we'll also dye yarn to give to each of our shareholders so that they get a dye kit for one flower in one color, and then they also get already dyed yarn in a different color with a different flower that we've harvested that month.
So when I was lucky enough to bump into you, I was late in the season. I missed last year's, but this year I jumped on it as soon as you advertised that it was available. I jumped on it, bought my share, so I'm super excited about it this year. But I think it's such an incredible way to be able to be more in touch with the actual, farming and flowering process of this, as opposed to getting, for example, a really common way people will use dyes is through like a powder form where the materials have already been ground down to, concentrated material. And I just much prefer seeing the actual flower. And so from that space, did you then dry them in order to make your kits, or did you use them fresh for your kits?
So for our kits, we always dry the flowers. We have a big commercial dehydrator that's running all the time in harvest season. And this year we're also building a drying shed so that we can harness the sun and wind to do some of that work for us.
That's going to be right on the plot of land where you have the farm
That's right.
itself, right?
So for all of our dye kits, we always use packets of dried flowers. However, you can also, and you know this better than anyone, but you can dye with fresh flowers too.
Oh yeah, I mean that's any foraging that I do, it's fresh, right? And I did use some of your coreopsis when I was here, and that was fresh.
Luckily, you have a local place to come forage.
Yeah, no. Yeah, exactly.
foraging.
So this is farm foraging. What I did in the video was I compared fresh coreopsis to dried coreopsis, which I had purchased from Botanical Colors.
Yep.
And I did a comparison of those two and how they looked in the dye pot, and they were different. So both equally beautiful.
Yeah,
dried.
that's
You
the
know-
cool thing about dyes in general, but especially with dye flowers, like people can learn from you in all of your videos, but anything different that you do with them, whether you're using them fresh or using them dried or using them more or less processed, it just kind of comes out with a different product.
You know, I always say learn by doing, right? So you're going to learn a lot more, and you're going to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And then also all of these different processes allow you to expand your color palette. And that I think is amazing because there are hundreds of plants that bring color, many of which people don't even think about. But then beyond that, each one of those plants may be giving its color either in a flower or in the roots or in the leaves and stems, and then you can shift the color by different ways in which you extract it or use it. So I mean,
Well,
I really dig that.
we go by that philosophy too, because every once in a while one of our shareholders will receive one of their kits, put it together, send us a picture and say, is this how it's supposed to come out? I always say, like, there's no such thing as supposed to in natural dyeing. It came out how it came out, and
The
it's
answer is
perfect
yes.
exactly how it is.
It's I think everyone on Color Quest has heard this 1,000 times out of my mouth, but it's just like you absolutely have to be open to the wonder that is, and the idea that nature shares this with us. It's a gift. So there's something to be said about that. And so taking those expectations out, you're going to be so much happier and you're going to see things that you never expected.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I mean, it really is amazing. Okay. Amy, I noticed that you have this plastic container filled with what I believe to be indigo.
Yep, that's exactly right. So this is indigo that was harvested last year, and we hung up in bundles to dry. So this would have been one bundle. And at the end of it, these are the natural seed pods that were kind of like the pink flower looking things, if you saw those last year.
Right.
And so this is their dry version, and the reason we have them all here is because we want to keep the seeds. Alright, so here's how this process works. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my fingers to peel them off. Just basically take these pods and peel them away from the stems. These are not the seeds because they all have kind of a husk around them, or a chaff we say. So the next thing I'm going to do is start crushing it in my fingers.
This is just a weird little side thing I have to say. I have a piece of artwork named Chaff that I just sold.
Oh, amazing. So once you start seeing these black things now, that's because I'm crushing it and the black seeds are popping out of the chaff.
So that's an actual seed right there.
That's right. And a lot of these are seeds, but they just might be covered in a shell, so I can't really see what exactly they look like. And if there's a really thin skin on it and you plant it, it'll survive. But I like to be able to see what's going on because a lot of these are kind of going to be bad seeds, actually. They're underdeveloped seeds.
Okay.
So I'll put two side by side on my hand. This is like a big dark one that we like. This one looks kind of sad, and if we planted it, it would either not work or just not be not what I'm looking for. So yeah, my visual cue is that they're dark. So one thing I could do is go through here and just try and use my fingers to pick out all the dark ones. But it's not really efficient that way, especially on a bigger scale. What I can really use to my advantage is the weight of them. And the next thing I'm going to do is start using, kind of sifting through it to try and separate the dark seeds from everything else. So everything else includes little pieces of the stem, the pieces of the chaff, and then those underdeveloped seeds. So I'm just kind of going to shake it out, and you can see things start separating. The next thing I'm going to do is apply some air. So things are starting to spread out. So all this stuff around here is the really, really light chaff. And then I have heavier things in the middle, including my seeds. And I'm going to just blow the chaff away. So what you saw, what we were doing with the Cosmos with the box fan is just like a bigger scale version of this same thing. We're also saving some seed because we also package up our seeds and sell them as seed packets.
So you're gonna sell the indigo as well?
That's right.
Ooh.
You can kind of see in the space that we had that conversation, I took that handful of pods and now have turned it into a little handful of seeds. So that's what I got from that amount of seed pods, and now I would just kind of store them.
So that's what you have gotten for your indigo so far.
Yep. Well, that's one of the reasons why it's important for us as a farm to keep our own seeds. It's because as we go through this process year after year after year, we're essentially doing like a little bit of a natural selection experiment. And those seeds that have traits that adapt them to survive the best in our climate and in our soil and all of the specific attributes of our farm will just continue to rise to the surface and outcompete. And so we're going to end up with basically a set of seeds that's specifically suited to our farm.
Fantastic. So Max and Amy, I want to thank you for inviting me here and allowing me to see the beginning of your growing season this year. We just spent time planting the sulfur Cosmos.
Yep.
Yes.
Now, am I going to be able to get my hands on some of those seeds?
Yes, you will. We
Okay.
actually now have them available on our website at thecolorfarmwa.com. We'll be selling those in addition to a couple other plants. And that's where you can go to check out what we have on offer, buy the seeds, or sign up for our email list if you're interested.
Yeah, because if you want to get on that farm share next year, you got to be on the email list.
Yep, that's right. We tend to sell out of the farm share every spring.
And I will have it down below in the description as well, so people can share in the beauty that you're growing here at the Color Farm and having a tiny little seedling slice to put in your own dyer garden. So thank you again for what you're doing. Love it.
Thank
you
you.
too.
I don't know about you, but I just learned so much and actually had an amazing time watching to see what Amy and Max are doing differently from what I'm doing in my own home setup, but also just understanding a lot more about the process of growing natural color in the form of dye plants. And I'm going to be teaching a course there this summer at the Color Farm when we are getting our share box of indigo. So you know I'll be filming about that. And next week we're going to be going back into a warmer climate. Not me specifically, but we will be looking at hibiscus. Thanks to the generosity and kindness of one of the people here in our Color Quest community, I have been given a box of fresh hibiscus to test out in my dye pot. So join me as we look at what I might be able to brew up with that next week on Color Quest. It's organic. Yeah.
Very spicy.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Tastes like Grey Poupon.
Yeah.